Going on in Yemen. If you've just joined us, Britain stands prepared to carry out further strikes on Houthi targets if commercial and military vessels continue to come under attack in the Red Sea, according to Lord Cameron. He's written this morning for the Telegraph newspaper. He said that if the Houthis, who control much of Yemen, are permitted to deny passage to ships, then vital supply chains are threatened and prices will go up in Britain and across the globe. And that's the importance for us here in the UK, and I think that can't be overemphasised enough. He went further to say the UK's unambiguous position is that we will always defend the freedom of navigation, and crucially, we will be prepared to back words with actions. Now, there is another article which was published yesterday in The Spectator with the simple title, "Have the Houthis Gone Rogue?" So Iran clearly has been warned. The US has delivered a private message to Iran to rein in their proxies. But this article then goes further to say, have the Houthis actually gone rogue? Has Iran actually got control over what the Houthis are doing? Well, I'm delighted to say joining us now is Lord Andrew Robathan, who is the former Armed Forces Minister. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Really good of you to join us. Where do you stand on this? I mean, clearly the rhetoric coming out of the United States is very strong, and indeed from the United Kingdom. We saw these concerted strikes, the missile strikes. I think the British government, the American government, had no option other than to strike back.
Well, I think, look, the Houthis were launching attacks on British and American warships. Now, this is obviously, let's get this straight, this is largely an American-led operation, of course, and we have only one warship there. But if they're launching attacks on your warships, you're being tested, really. Whether it's being tested by Iran or the Houthis themselves, I think the Houthis are entirely Iranian proxies. But if you just do nothing, they'll go on and on. So we had to do something. I mean, it's as simple as that. Furthermore, this is a huge issue for the world economy, and our prosperity, the world prosperity, is actually very, very important. It's about starvation and other things that people understand. You have to have trade routes running, and the Houthis are trying to close them.
And in terms of that trade, I mentioned this yesterday, 15% of world trade passes through the Red Sea and into the Suez Canal, and something like 30% of container ships. Can you just explain to people just how significant this is in terms of trade passing to the United Kingdom and the rest of Europe?
Well, we're having, we hear a lot about the cost of living crisis. If they close the Red Sea route, they will, of course, close the Suez Canal. And we saw what happened when that container ship blocked the Suez Canal for only a week, I think it was. This would be a disaster. I mean, it would really impact 15%, 20% of world trade, which would have an impact on all our prosperity, all our the cost of living crisis would get worse, inflation will get worse, all these things. We need to understand that we are being tested either by Iran or, as your last comment suggested, possibly by the Houthis themselves. But the idea that this is about Gaza is completely nonsense. Why should the Houthis in Yemen, who've been fighting a war now for several years, why should they be attacking shipping in the Red Sea because of Gaza? I mean, this is nonsense.
I mean, it's interesting you mentioned there the Houthis saying that they're acting in support of Palestinians in Gaza. But if they were doing that, they wouldn't be attacking ships indiscriminately, would they? So that makes no sense.
Well, indeed. Originally, they said they were just going to attack Israeli ships. Apparently, yesterday or the day before, they attacked a Russian one, so their intelligence is good, obviously. It has very interesting geopolitical aspects, if I might say so, because, of course, the Russians have been backing Iran, and the Saudis have been cozying up slightly to the Russians for understandable reasons, perhaps. Now we have a situation where the Iranian-backed Houthis are fighting against the Saudis, essentially, and the Arabs, the Gulf Arabs. And I suspect this is not going to have great consequences for Russian-Saudi relations.
And just in terms of the Houthis themselves, they seem to be provoking the West here. How much control do you think Iran has over them?
Do you know, David, I can't really say that because I haven't been to Aden or the Yemen for a very long time. But I suspect the Iranians, who control the purse strings, have quite a lot of control. But I don't know.
And so just in terms of people in this country, and there are many people saying, here we go again, we're fighting yet another war. You mentioned the cost of living crisis, for example. People are really struggling. It's getting colder. People have to then pay for energy. But this is all interrelated, isn't it? And that's why it plays so heavily.
Well, absolutely. I think what I would say as a former soldier is we should never, ever enter into any conflict lightly or in a gung-ho manner. And that's always a concern. We should be very measured and sensible about what we're doing. But if you have somebody launching missiles against your ships, if you just sit back and say, oh, well, that's a bit of a pity, I think that's exactly the wrong answer. And you'll be seen to be weak, and weakness breeds further aggression from the aggressor.
And just in terms of how we should feel in this country, how worried should we be?
Well, if you want to look at the whole geopolitical situation, I think we should be very worried. We have a war raging in Europe, in Ukraine. We have a war raging in Gaza, in Israel, and the Middle East. We have this business with the Houthis, and as a nation, we have let our guard down. The West as a whole has let its guard down. We desperately need to spend more on defence because our defences are very weak. And it's no good saying, oh, well, the NHS takes precedence. Well, the NHS is hugely important, but it's no damn good if somebody's blowing up your buildings or your ships or your trade and starving you, whatever it may be. We need to spend more on defence. And because that is the first duty of government, is always the defence of the realm.
Do you think that's changed political thinking? Because obviously enshrining it into 3% of GDP seems eminently sensible to me, or if not more. Do you think the public is now on side?
I think the public is starting to realise that. Of course, there's always priorities, and I mentioned the NHS. We spend far too much on welfare, in my opinion. But yes, I think the public is changing its views. But when you say 3%, when I was serving in Germany during the Cold War, which was a very real conflict, although there wasn't any action, it was against, of course, essentially Russia. When I was serving in Germany, it was 5% and more that we spent on defence, and we were well defended. We had 55,000 troops in Germany alone. Well, our army now is down to 75,000, so, do the maths.
So what would you like to see it put at? What level of GDP?
I wouldn't want to put a figure, but I would say that certainly we should be pushing up well beyond 3%, certainly to 3%. And there's all sorts of things which we don't have time to go into, like why are pensions, which never were included in the defence budget, now included in the defence budget? Pensions are a huge issue. I'm in receipt of one, by the way. But this is, we need to recalibrate our attitude towards spending on defence.
And can I just ask you quickly about Ukraine as well? £2.5 billion pledged by the Prime Minister, also the first to sign up to a pact with Ukraine. Can Ukraine really win?
Oh, I absolutely believe so. I mean, I haven't been there. I might be going next month, actually. But I absolutely believe so. They have huge determination, and the Russians are struggling to get unhappy recruits into the front line who get slaughtered like sheep. I think the Ukrainians can win, but we need to support them because it's quite a small country in terms of economy, and it needs to be supported by the West, by the UK, by the EU, and by Britain.
Very good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for your time. That's Lord Andrew Robathan there, former Armed Forces Minister.